I'm Morganne Harper, a 32-year-old journalist living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've spent the last 8 years building my career at the Charlotte Chronicle, covering local politics with a sharp eye and a sharper pen. But last winter, my life wasn't about deadlines or headlines. It was about a secret I was carrying, one I wasn't ready to share with anyone, especially my family. I was 5 months pregnant, and the father of my baby, my ex-fiancé Ethan, had walked out of my life 6 months earlier, saying he wasn't ready to settle down. I found out I was pregnant a month after he left, and I decided I'd raise the baby on my own. But telling my family? That was a whole different story. My mother, Evelyn Harper, is a prominent figure in Charlotte's high society, a charity organizer with a reputation for perfection. She's the kind of woman who believes in tradition and doing things the right way. To her, an unwed mother was a scandal, a stain on the Harper name. My older brother, Caleb, followed in her footsteps, running a successful law firm and always playing by the rules. I knew they'd judge me, maybe even disown me, so I kept my pregnancy a secret, even as my belly started to show. The only person I told was my best friend and colleague, Sophie Bennett, who worked in the Chronicle's lifestyle section. "You'll have to tell them eventually, Morgan," Sophie said one chilly December morning as we sat at our desks sipping coffee. "I know," I sighed, placing a hand on my stomach. "I'm seeing Dr. Ellis this afternoon. She says the baby's doing great, but I'm still so scared." Dr. Rachel Ellis had been my rock through this pregnancy, always reassuring me that I could handle motherhood on my own. "You're stronger than you think," she told me at my last appointment, her kind eyes giving me a flicker of hope. That afternoon, my checkup went well, my baby was healthy, and I was starting to feel those little kicks that made everything real. "You should tell your family soon," Dr. Ellis said as I left her office. "They deserve to know, and you deserve their support." I nodded, but my stomach twisted with anxiety. I knew she was right, but I wasn't ready to face my mother's disapproval or Caleb's lectures. That evening, I was expected at my mother's annual winter gala, a fancy event at the Harper estate to raise money for local charities. I dreaded going, another night of fake smiles and small talk, but I couldn't skip it. As I drove home to change, my phone rang. It was Evelyn, her voice crisp and commanding. "Morgan, I need you to arrive early tonight. We have a special guest, a senator, and I want the family to make a good impression." I agreed, but as I hung up, a wave of nausea hit me, and not just from the pregnancy. I was running out of time to tell them the truth, and the weight of that secret was crushing me. I looked down at my stomach, whispering, "We'll get through this, little one. I promise." But as I turned onto a winding road near my apartment, the twilight fading into darkness, I had no idea that my promise was about to be tested in the worst way possible. I left my apartment that evening, dressed in a loose-fitting black gown that hid my growing bump, my mind racing with how I'd get through the gala without anyone noticing. The Harper estate was a 20-minute drive, but the roads were slick with frost, and the dim light made it hard to see. I was halfway there, rehearsing how I'd tell my mother about the baby, when my car suddenly felt off. I pressed the brake to slow down around a sharp curve, but nothing happened. Panic surged through me as I pumped the pedal again. Still nothing. Car was picking up speed, hurtling toward the edge of the road where a steep drop-off loomed. I yanked the steering wheel, trying to steer into the curve, but the car wouldn't respond. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "No, no, no," I screamed, my voice echoing in the empty car. The guardrail came into view and I braced myself, my last thought before the impact. My baby! Car smashed through the rail, and everything went black as I felt the sickening lurch of the vehicle plummeting down the embankment. I could hear the crunch of metal, the shattering of glass, and then nothing, just a void that swallowed me whole. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke to the sound of sirens and the sharp sting of cold air on my face. My body ached, and I could feel something warm, blood, trickling down my forehead. I tried to move, but pain shot through my abdomen and I gasped, clutching my stomach. "My baby," I whispered, my voice hoarse. Paramedics were shouting around me, their voices a blur as they worked to free me from the wreckage. "She's conscious," one of them yelled. "We need to get her to the hospital now." I felt hands lifting me, the cold metal of a stretcher beneath me, and I kept murmuring, "Please save my baby," even as my vision blurred with tears. Charlotte Medical Center, I was rushed into the emergency room, the bright lights blinding me as doctors and nurses swarmed around. I kept murmuring, "My baby, please my baby," but no one answered. I felt a needle prick my arm, and then darkness took me again. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, the room dim and quiet except for the steady beep of a monitor. My mother and Caleb were there, sitting beside me, their faces pale. Evelyn's usually impeccable makeup was smudged, and Caleb's tie was loosened, his eyes red. "Morgan, thank God," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "You're awake." I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in my ribs stopped me. My hand instinctively went to my stomach, and I froze. It was flat. "The baby," I croaked, looking at my mother. Evelyn's expression hardened, and she looked away. "There was a complication," she said, her voice cold. "The baby didn't make it." The words hit me like a tidal wave, and I let out a sob, tears streaming down my face. No, that can't be true," I whispered, but the emptiness in my body told me it was. Caleb reached for my hand, but I pulled away, my grief too raw to accept comfort from anyone, especially them. I closed my eyes, the weight of my loss crushing me, and all I could think was that I'd failed my baby before I even had the chance to hold them. The days after I woke up in the hospital blurred together, each one heavier than the last. My body was bruised and broken, fractured ribs, a concussion, cuts and bruises all over, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. I'd lost my baby, the little life I'd been so scared to bring into the world but had already loved so fiercely. Kept replaying the accident in my mind, the moment the brakes failed, the sickening drop as my car went over the cliff. I couldn't understand how it had happened. My car was only 2 years old, and I'd had it serviced just a month ago. Evelyn and Caleb visited every day, but their presence brought me no comfort. My mother's words when I first woke up, "The baby didn't make it," kept echoing in my head, along with the coldness in her voice. She hadn't even looked at me when she said it, and Caleb had just sat there, silent, his face unreadable. I'd always known they wouldn't approve of my pregnancy, but I never imagined they'd be so detached. "You're lucky to be alive, Morgan," Evelyn said on the second day, her tone more annoyed than relieved. "A baby out of wedlock would have been a disaster for the family. Maybe this is for the best." I stared at her, my mouth open, unable to believe what I was hearing. "For the best," I whispered, my voice trembling. "My baby is gone, Mom." "How can you say that?" Caleb shifted uncomfortably, finally speaking up. "She didn't mean it like that, Morgan. We're glad you're okay." But his words felt hollow, and I turned my face away, tears burning my eyes. I didn't want their pity, I wanted my baby. The only person who truly understood my grief was Sophie, who came to see me as soon as she heard. She brought a small teddy bear and a bouquet of lilies, her eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry, Morgan," she said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. "I can't imagine what you're going through." For the first time since the accident, I felt seen, and I broke down, sobbing into her shoulder as she held me. Dr. Ellis came the next day, her face etched with sorrow. "Morgan, I'm so sorry," she said, sitting beside my bed. "The impact was too severe. We did everything we could." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "I was going to tell them," I finally whispered. "That night at the gala, I was going to tell them about the baby." Dr. Ellis squeezed my hand, her eyes kind. "You're still here, Morgan. And you're stronger than you know. You'll get through this." But I didn't feel strong. I felt broken, like a piece of me had been ripped away and I didn't know how to put myself back together. On the 4th day in the hospital, as I lay staring at the ceiling, a knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. A man in a dark suit stepped in, his face serious but kind. "Ms. Harper, I'm Detective Nathan Carter with the Charlotte Police Department," he said, showing me his badge. "I'm here to talk about your accident." I frowned, sitting up slightly despite the pain in my ribs. "The accident?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What's there to talk about?" My brakes failed. It was an accident." Detective Carter sat down, his expression grim. "That's what we thought at first, Ms. Harper. But after examining your car, we found something concerning. The brake line was cut, deliberately. This wasn't an accident. Someone tampered with your vehicle." My heart stopped, the room spinning as his words sank in. "Tampered with?" I whispered, my hand instinctively going to my stomach, where my baby should have been. "You're saying someone did this on purpose?" He nodded, his eyes steady. "Yes. We're treating this as a possible attempted homicide. I need to ask you some questions about your life, your relationships, anyone who might have a reason to harm you." I stared at him, my mind racing. Who would want to hurt me? I was a journalist, sure, but I covered local politics, budget meetings, city council debates, nothing controversial enough to make enemies. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't have enemies. I can't think of anyone who'd do this." Detective Carter pulled out a notebook, his pen poised. "What about your family? Any tension there? I understand you were pregnant. Did they know?" I shook my head, tears welling up. "No, I hadn't told them. I was going to that night, but they didn't know." Just then, the door opened and Evelyn and Caleb walked in, their faces darkening when they saw the detective. "What's going on here?" Evelyn demanded, her voice sharp. "My daughter is recovering. She doesn't need to be interrogated." Detective Carter stood, unfazed. "Mrs. Harper, I'm investigating your daughter's accident. We have reason to believe it wasn't an accident at all. The brake line was cut." Evelyn's face paled and Caleb's jaw tightened, but neither of them spoke. "That's ridiculous," Evelyn finally said, her voice cold. "It must have been a mechanical failure. Morgan's car was old, wasn't it?" Detective Carter shook his head. "It's a 2022 model, inspected a month ago. The brakes were in perfect condition until someone cut the line." I watched my mother and brother, a chill running down my spine. They seemed nervous. "Have you noticed anyone suspicious around Morgan recently?" the detective asked, his eyes flicking between them. "Anyone who might have had access to her car?" Evelyn folded her arms, her expression icy. "No, of course not. This is a waste of time. Morgan needs rest." But as they left the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something, and that my baby's death might be tied to the people I trusted most. Detective Carter's revelation left me reeling. Someone had deliberately cut my brake line, causing the accident that killed my baby. The thought that it wasn't an accident, that someone had targeted me, made my grief even heavier, turning it into a burning need for answers. I couldn't just lie in that hospital bed, waiting for the police to figure it out. I needed to know who had done this and why. My body was still weak, but my mind was racing, piecing together every detail I could remember about the days leading up to the accident. I kept thinking about my family, Evelyn's coldness, Caleb's silence. Could they really be involved? I called Sophie that afternoon, my hands trembling as I held the phone. "Sophie, the police were here," I said, my voice shaking. "They said the accident wasn't an accident. Someone cut my brake line." There was a long pause on the other end, and then Sophie gasped. "Morgan, that's horrifying. Who would do that to you?" I swallowed hard, tears burning my eyes. I don't know. But I can't stop thinking about my family. They were so cold about the baby, Sophie. And when the detective told them about the brake line, they seemed nervous. Sophie's voice softened. You think they might be involved? Your own family? I didn't want to believe it, but the suspicion was growing, gnawing at me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. I don't know, I admitted. But I need to find out. Can you help me? I can't leave the hospital yet, but maybe you can look into some things for me. Sophie didn't hesitate. Of course, Morgan. Tell me what you need. I asked her to check on my car's last service at Bennett Auto Shop, where I'd taken it a month ago, and to see if she could find any security footage from my apartment's parking lot. If someone had tampered with my car, they might have been caught on camera. I also asked her to look into whether anyone at the Chronicle might have had a grudge against me, maybe a politician I'd written about, someone I'd exposed in an article. It was a long shot, but I needed to cover every possibility. That evening, Detective Carter returned, his expression more serious than before. We've been looking into the auto shop that serviced your car, he said, sitting down. The records show your brakes were fine after the inspection, which means the tampering happened afterward. We also found something else. A witness at the shop said a man came by a few days before your accident asking about your car. He claimed to be your brother. My heart sank. Caleb? I whispered. The detective nodded. We're trying to confirm it, but the description matches. Do you know why he might have been there? I shook my head, my mind spinning. Caleb had never mentioned anything about my car. Why would he go to the shop? And why wouldn't he tell me? I don't know, I said, my voice trembling. But my family didn't know about the baby, at least I didn't think they did. Could they have found out somehow? Detective Carter's eyes narrowed. It's possible. We're also looking into your mother's driver, a man named Harold Grayson. He has access to the estate's vehicles and potentially yours if you parked there recently. I nodded, remembering I'd been at the estate a week before the accident for a family dinner. Had someone tampered with my car then? The thought made my stomach churn, but I knew I had to keep pushing for the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I looked at the detective, my voice firm despite the tears in my eyes. I need to know who did this, detective. For my baby. Sophie came through for me the next day, arriving at the hospital with a USB drive and a worried look on her face. I got the security footage from your apartment's parking lot, she said, sitting beside me. It's from the day before the accident. You need to see this. She plugged the drive into her laptop and pulled up the video. The grainy footage showed my car parked in its usual spot, and then, around 2 a.m., a figure approached. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, and he moved quickly, kneeling by the front of my car for a few minutes before disappearing into the shadows. That's not Caleb, I said, my voice trembling. But I think I know that coat. It looks like Harold's, my mother's driver. Sophie's eyes widened. Harold Grayson? The one the detective mentioned? I nodded, my heart pounding. He's been with my family for years. He drives my mother everywhere, runs errands for her, and he has access to the estate's garage. I felt sick, the pieces starting to come together in a way I didn't want to believe. If Harold had tampered with my car, it couldn't have been on his own. He had to be acting on someone's orders. And the only person with that kind of power over him was my mother. I called Detective Carter immediately, telling him about the footage. We'll bring Harold in for questioning, he said, his voice grim. But there's something else, Morgan. We found a record of a phone call between your mother and your brother 2 days before the accident. They were discussing a problem that needed to be handled. We're still digging into what that means, but it's looking more and more like your family might be involved. I hung up, my hands shaking, tears streaming down my face. My own family, my mother, my brother, could they really have done this? Could they have hated the idea of my baby so much that they'd try to kill me? The next day, Detective Carter returned with an update. Harold confessed, he said, his voice heavy. He admitted to cutting your brake line, but he says he was following orders from your mother. She told him to take care of the problem after she found out about your pregnancy. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. She knew. I whispered. The detective nodded. We found a letter from your doctor's office in her study, routine paperwork about your pregnancy. She must have seen it when you were at the estate. Harold says she was furious, said an unwed mother would ruin the family's reputation. She ordered him to make it look like an accident. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest, the betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. My mother, my own mother, had tried to kill me, and in doing so, she'd taken my baby's life. What about Caleb? I asked, my voice barely audible. He knew about the pregnancy, but Harold claims he didn't know the full plan, just that your mother was handling it. I didn't know what to believe anymore, but one thing was clear. I needed to confront them, to hear the truth from their own mouths, no matter how much it hurt. I was discharged from the hospital a week later, my body still aching but my resolve stronger than ever. I couldn't let this go. I needed to face my mother and brother, to look them in the eye and hear them admit what they'd done. Detective Carter arranged for them to be brought to the police station for questioning, and he asked if I wanted to be there. It might be hard, Morgan, he warned, his voice gentle. But if you want answers, this could be your chance. I nodded, my jaw set. I need to do this. For my baby. I spent the morning preparing myself, replaying every moment of my life with my family, searching for signs I'd missed, their judgment, their coldness, their obsession with appearances. The station, I sat in a small observation room, watching through a one-way mirror as Detective Carter questioned my mother first. Evelyn sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, her face a mask of cold indifference. Mrs. Harper, we have Harold Grayson's confession, the detective said, his voice firm. He says you ordered him to cut the brake line on Morgan's car. Is that true? Evelyn's lips tightened, but she didn't flinch. Harold is lying, she said, her voice icy. I would never do such a thing to my own daughter. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted to the side, a flicker of fear breaking through her composure. Detective Carter slid a photo across the table, the security footage of Harold tampering with my car. We have video evidence, Mrs. Harper. And we have phone records showing you and your son discussing a problem that needed to be handled. We also found a letter from Morgan's doctor in your study confirming her pregnancy. You knew, didn't you? Evelyn's face paled, and for the first time I saw her falter. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she finally said, her voice trembling. I just wanted to scare her, to make her see reason. An unwed mother in our family, it would have ruined us. I told Harold to do something, but I didn't think she'd lose the baby. I felt like I'd been slapped, my breath catching in my throat. She hadn't meant to kill me, but she'd meant to hurt me, to force me into submission, and in doing so, she'd taken my baby's life. Detective Carter pressed on. And your son, Caleb, did he know about the plan? Evelyn hesitated, then shook her head. He knew I was upset about the pregnancy, but I didn't tell him the details. He thought I was just going to talk to her. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but when Caleb was brought in, his story matched hers. I didn't know, Morgan, he said, his voice breaking as he looked at the mirror, knowing I was watching. I swear, I didn't know what she was planning. I left the station that day with a heavy heart, the truth more painful than I'd imagined. My mother had betrayed me in the worst way, and even if Caleb hadn't known the full plan, he'd still been complicit in their judgment of me. I knew I'd never see them the same way again, but I also knew I had to keep fighting for my baby's memory and for my own healing. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, but I felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd faced the truth, and now I could start to move forward. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Detective Carter and his team built a solid case against my mother, using Harold's confession, the security footage, and the phone records as evidence. Evelyn was arrested on charges of attempted murder and fetal homicide, and Harold faced charges as an accomplice. Caleb wasn't charged, but the investigation revealed he'd known about my mother's anger over my pregnancy and hadn't done anything to stop her. That was enough to shatter what little trust one had left in him. I attended every court hearing, sitting in the back row with Sophie by my side, her hand in mine as I listened to the details of my mother's betrayal. Evelyn never looked at me, her face a mask of defiance even as the evidence piled up against her. When the judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow, relief that justice had been served, but sorrow for the family I'd lost. Harold received a 6-year sentence in a plea deal, and Caleb left Charlotte shortly after, unable to face the fallout. I didn't try to stop him, I had nothing left to say to him. Through it all, I was grappling with my grief, the loss of my baby, a wound that wouldn't heal. Dr. Ellis referred me to a therapist, who helped me start to process the trauma of the accident and the betrayal of my family. I also decided to hold a small memorial for my baby, whom I named Grace. Sophie and Detective Carter came, along with a few colleagues from the Chronicle, and we gathered at a quiet park near my apartment. I placed a single white rose on a small plaque I had made, inscribed with Grace's name and the words, "Forever in my heart." As I stood there, tears streaming down my face, I whispered, "I'm so sorry, Grace. I'll never stop fighting for you." That night, I sat with Sophie at my apartment, a glass of wine in my hand as we talked about the future. "You're stronger than anyone I know, Morgan," she said, her voice soft. "You've been through hell and you're still standing." I smiled weakly, wiping away a tear. "I don't feel strong, but I'm trying for Grace." Sophie squeezed my hand, her eyes full of understanding. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm here always." And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope, a small light in the darkness of my grief. A year after the accident, I was still healing, but I was starting to find my footing again. The trial was over, my mother was in prison, and I'd cut ties with Caleb completely. I'd also taken a leave of absence from the Chronicle to focus on my recovery, spending my days writing in a journal about Grace and the life we might have had. It was therapeutic, a way to keep her memory alive while I worked through my pain. I'd also started attending a support group for women who'd lost children, and the shared stories of grief and resilience helped me feel less alone. Hearing other women talk about their losses, some to illness, others to violence, gave me a sense of community, a reminder that I wasn't the only one carrying this kind of pain. Sophie had become my rock, checking in on me daily and dragging me out of the house when I needed a distraction. She'd also introduced me to her brother, Liam, a kind-hearted teacher who'd lost his wife to cancer 2 years earlier. We bonded over our shared experiences of loss, and over time, our friendship grew into something more. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a connection I hadn't expected, a reminder that I could still find joy after so much pain. Liam had a quiet strength about him, and his patience with my grief made me feel safe in a way I hadn't in a long time. Detective Carter stayed in touch too, becoming a friend rather than just the man who'd solved my case. He and his wife, Emily, invited me over for dinner one evening, and I was touched by their warmth and kindness. "You're part of our family now, Morgan," Emily said, her smile genuine. "We're so proud of how far you've come." I smiled, my heart swelling with gratitude. I'd lost my biological family, but I'd found a new one, people who loved me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. Emily even shared stories of her own struggles with loss, and I felt a deep connection to her, a sense of belonging I'd been missing for so long. I also started volunteering at a local women's shelter, using my journalism skills to help them with fundraising and awareness campaigns. It felt good to give back, to channel my pain into something positive. One day, as I was leaving the shelter, I got a letter from Caleb. It was short, an apology for his role in everything and a promise to change. I didn't respond, I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I kept the letter, a small sign that maybe someday I could let go of the anger. For now, though, I was focused on healing, on building a life that honored Grace's memory and the strength I'd found within myself. I looked at the letter one last time before tucking it away, whispering to myself, "Maybe one day, Caleb, but not today." 2 years after the accident, I stood at Grace's memorial in the park, a bouquet of white roses in my hands. The plaque I'd placed there still shone in the sunlight, her name etched into my heart as much as it was into the stone. "I miss you every day, Grace," I whispered, placing the flowers down. "But I'm trying to live a life you'd be proud of." I'd come so far since that terrible night, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I was back at the Chronicle writing again, but now I focused on stories about women's rights and social justice, using my platform to advocate for change. Liam and I had grown closer, and while we were taking things slow, I could see a future with him, a future I hadn't thought possible after losing Grace. Sophie was still my best friend, and Detective Carter and Emily had become like family, inviting me to every holiday and celebration. I'd also reconnected with Dr. Ellis, thanking her for the support she'd given me during my pregnancy. "You've turned your pain into purpose, Morgan," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "That's the greatest gift you can give Grace." I'd also started a small foundation in Grace's name, raising money for women who'd lost children to violence or tragedy. It was my way of keeping her memory alive, of making sure her short life had meaning. As I stood at her memorial, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I'd lost so much, but I'd gained something too, a strength I didn't know I had, and a new family who loved me unconditionally. So I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have fought for the truth, even if it meant losing your family? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm Morgan, and this has been my story.